The morning light filtered through my faded yellow curtains as I sat at my kitchen table, a cup of coffee warming my hands. Those hands had seen better days, veined, spotted with age, knuckles slightly swollen from decades of washing and cutting hair. But they were strong hands, capable hands, hands that had built something from nothing. I'm Winifred Culpepper, Winnie to everyone who knows me, and at 67 years old, I thought I'd survived all the hard knocks life could throw at me. Growing up dirt poor in a trailer on the outskirts of Pigeon Creek, Tennessee, I'd learned early that nobody was coming to save me. My daddy left when I was 8, and Mama worked 2 jobs until her body gave out. By 16, I was cutting hair in our kitchen to make extra money. By 18, I was pregnant and alone when Jethro's daddy decided fatherhood wasn't in his plans. The house I sat in that morning wasn't much by most standards, a modest 3-bedroom ranch-style home in a working-class neighborhood outside Nashville. But to me, it was everything. 27 years of mortgage payments scraped together month after month from tips and salon income. 27 years of keeping the roof patched, the water heater running, and the property taxes paid. This house represented every sacrifice I'd made to give Jethro the stability I never had. I took another sip of coffee and stared at the envelope I'd found in yesterday's mail. It was from First Tennessee Bank, addressed to me, regarding a mortgage I knew nothing about. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it again, hoping the words had somehow changed overnight. Dear Mrs. Culpepper, thank you for your recent home equity line of credit application. We are pleased to inform you that your application has been approved for the amount of $175,000. My stomach tightened. I hadn't applied for any loan. The house had been paid off for 3 years, the proudest day of my life when I made that final payment. I'd called Tallulah, and we'd burned the mortgage papers in a little ceremony in my backyard, drinking cheap champagne and dancing like we were teenagers again. I reached for the phone and dialed the bank, my fingers punching the numbers with determination. After navigating an automated system that seemed designed to prevent human contact, I finally reached a loan officer. Ma'am, according to our records, you signed the application on April 3rd. The funds were dispersed last week to your joint account. Joint account? I don't have a joint account, not anymore. Not since Jethro moved out 15 years ago. There was a pause on the line. The joint account is with Jethro Culpepper. The signatures match our records. My blood ran cold as the pieces clicked into place. Jethro had been unusually attentive lately, stopping by unannounced, bringing me groceries, offering to take me to doctor appointments. He'd even taken me to lunch at that fancy new place downtown, something he'd never done before. During one of his visits, he'd asked me to sign some tax documents he'd prepared for me, said it would save me money. I remembered signing papers without reading them carefully, trusting my own son. I hung up the phone and sat in stunned silence. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. My own flesh and blood had stolen my house from under me, the one thing I'd worked my entire life to secure. Through the window, I could see Mrs. Peavy next door hanging her laundry. Life was just going on like normal, while mine had shattered. I felt the familiar tightness in my chest, that feeling that had accompanied every major crisis in my life. But alongside it was something else, something hot and clarifying: anger. I'd been underestimated my entire life. By my daddy when he left, by Jethro's father, by salon owners who wouldn't hire me because I didn't have the right look, by banks that initially refused me loans. Each time, I'd proven them wrong. I wouldn't be a victim now, not even to my own son. I picked up the phone again and dialed Tallulah. If anyone would understand, it would be her. We'd been friends since we were teenagers, back when we both worked at the diner in Pigeon Creek. She'd escaped to Nashville 2 years before me, letting me sleep on her couch when I arrived pregnant and scared. Tallulah, I need your help, I said when she answered, my voice steadier than I felt. And I need you to put me in touch with that friend of yours at the county records office. By that afternoon, I was sitting across from Opal Lynn Cottonwood at the county clerk's office. Her silver hair was perfectly styled. I'd been cutting it every month for 30 years, through her divorce, her battle with breast cancer, and her grandchildren's births. Winnie, honey, I pulled the records like you asked. The deed transfer was processed last week. She slid a document across the desk, her eyes sympathetic behind her cat-eye glasses. Your signature is right there. I stared at the signature. It looked like mine, but I knew I hadn't signed it. Jethro had always been good at forging my handwriting, a skill that had gotten him in trouble in high school when he'd written his own absence notes. That's not my signature, Opal Lynn. I never signed this. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. I thought it seemed strange. You've been talking about leaving that house to your granddaughter someday. She tapped a manicured finger on the document. If what you're saying is true, that's forgery. It's a criminal offense. I nodded, the weight of it all pressing down on me. I know. He's my son, but... My voice caught. I need to know what my options are. Opal Lynn glanced at her watch, then at the office door. Officially, I should tell you to get a lawyer and file a police report. She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a business card. Unofficially, you should call Magnolia Beauregard. She handled my daughter's messy divorce last year. That woman is sharper than a tack and twice as tough. I took the card, running my thumb over the embossed lettering. Magnolia had been married to Jethro for 3 tumultuous years before he'd cheated on her with his real estate assistant. Despite the bad blood with Jethro, she'd always been kind to me, even after the divorce. She'd sent me a card when I finished paying off my mortgage. There's something else you should know, Opal Lynn continued, her voice even quieter. Jethro listed the house with Blue Ridge Realty yesterday. Asking price is $320,000. The room seemed to tilt. He wasn't just taking out a loan against my house, he was selling it out from under me. Where did he expect me to go? What was his plan for me? I thanked Opal Lynn and left the county building in a daze. The spring air was warm, but I felt chilled to the bone. I'd raised that boy, worked my fingers to the bone to give him advantages I never had, paid for braces when I was eating beans and rice to make ends meet, scraped together community college tuition when the guidance counselor said he had potential, and this was how he repaid me. I walked 3 blocks to a small coffee shop and ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, a plain black coffee, before calling the number on Magnolia's card. I half expected to get a receptionist, but she answered directly. Magnolia Beauregard. Magnolia, it's Winnie Culpepper, Jethro's mama. The words felt strange in my mouth, like I was introducing myself as the mother of a stranger. There was a pause. Winnie? Is everything all right? No, honey, it's not. I took a deep breath. I need legal help, and I think it might involve pressing charges against my son. The silence on the other end lasted only a moment. I'm between appointments right now. Can you come to my office? I'm downtown on 4th Avenue. An hour later, I sat in Magnolia's sleek office, surrounded by law books and framed credentials. She'd always been a striking woman, tall, with sharp features and intelligent eyes. The years since her divorce from Jethro had been good to her. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who knew her worth. Let me make sure I understand, she said, after I'd explained everything. Jethro forged your signature on documents to transfer the deed of your house to himself, took out a home equity loan, and has now listed the property for sale without your knowledge or consent. I nodded, hands clasped tightly in my lap. That's right. Magnolia leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. That's forgery, fraud, and elder financial abuse. All criminal offenses. She tapped her pen against her legal pad. I assume you don't want your son to go to prison? The question hit me like a slap. Did I want Jethro to go to prison? The boy I'd raised, whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, whose nightmares I'd soothed? No. But the man who would steal his mother's home? That man deserved consequences. I want my house back, I said finally. And I want him to understand he can't take advantage of me. Beyond that, I shrugged, leaving the sentence unfinished. Magnolia nodded. There are a few ways we can approach this. The cleanest would be for Jethro to voluntarily return the deed and pay back whatever he's already spent from the loan. If he refuses, she outlined options involving courts, restraining orders, and criminal complaints. As she spoke, I found myself watching her hands, elegant, with a simple gold band on her right hand, but nothing on her left. Her nails were professionally manicured, her movements precise. These were the hands of someone who fought battles with words and laws instead of cleaning products and hair dyes. Jethro won't back down easily, I said when she finished. He's got pride bigger than his sense. A small smile played at the corner of Magnolia's mouth. Yes, I remember that about him. I don't have much money for legal fees, I admitted. The The salon does all right, but she held up a hand. Let's not worry about that right now. I think you need immediate action before he can finalize a sale. She turned to her computer and typed rapidly. I can file for an emergency injunction today to freeze any transactions related to the property. That will buy us time. Why are you helping me? I asked suddenly. After what happened with Jethro? Magnolia stopped typing and looked at me directly. You were the only good thing about being married to your son, Winnie. You taught me to make your famous peach cobbler. You helped me plant my first garden. And when Jethro and I split, you hugged me and told me I deserved better. She shrugged slightly. Besides, I hate seeing vulnerable people taken advantage of. It's why I specialized in elder law after I left family practice. I bristled slightly at being called vulnerable, but I understood what she meant. In the eyes of the law, a 67-year-old woman with limited financial resources was exactly that. I'm not as helpless as Jethro thinks, I said, my voice firmer than before. No, Magnolia agreed, her eyes appraising me with new interest. I don't believe you are. As I left her office with a plan in motion, I felt something I hadn't felt since opening that bank letter. Hope. I wasn't alone in this fight, and I had resources Jethro might not expect. On the bus ride home, I made a mental inventory of my allies. There was Tallulah, who'd been by my side through every crisis since we were teenagers. Opal Lynn at the county office. Delroy Washington, who'd been sweet on me for years and had recently retired from management at First Tennessee Bank. And now Magnolia, with her legal expertise and apparent willingness to help. By the time I reached my stop, another thought had crystallized in my mind. I knew about Jethro's financial troubles. He'd been dropping hints for months, mentioning temporary cash flow issues and investment opportunities that just needed some capital. What I hadn't known was how desperate those troubles were. I walked the 3 blocks to my house. My house, no matter what some forged document said, with a straight back and lifted chin. The azaleas I'd planted along the front walk were in full bloom, their pink flowers vibrant against the white clapboard siding. I'd repainted that siding myself 4 summers ago, balancing on a borrowed ladder while Tallulah handed up brushes and made sure I didn't fall. As I climbed the porch steps, I noticed Jethro's sleek black car parked in my driveway. My heart hammered in my chest, but I forced myself to take steady breaths. I wouldn't let him see me afraid. I found him in the kitchen, helping himself to a beer from my refrigerator. He looked up when I entered, flashing the charming smile that had always gotten him out of trouble. Hey, Mama. Thought I'd stop by and check on you. He gestured around the kitchen. Been thinking we should update this place. Those cabinets are straight out of the 70s. I set my purse down on the counter, watching him carefully. Is that why you're selling my house, Jethro? To update the kitchen? The beer bottle froze halfway to his lips. For a split second, surprise flashed across his face before he composed himself. What are you talking about? I know what you did, I said simply. The deed transfer, the home equity loan, the listing with Blue Ridge Realty. He set the beer down slowly. Mama, you're confused. I'm just trying to help you. This house is too much for you to manage alone. You're getting older. I'm worried about you falling on those porch steps. The condescension in his voice made my blood boil, but I kept my expression neutral. I'm not confused, son. I'm very clear-headed, and I want to know what you did with the $175,000 you borrowed against my home. Jethro's face hardened, the pretense dropping away. You wouldn't understand. I had an investment opportunity. Once it pays off, I can pay back the loan and then some. And selling the house? Was that part of your investment strategy too? He shrugged, a gesture so casual it made my heart ache with anger. You don't need all this space. I found a nice senior apartment complex. All 1 level, meals provided. You'd make friends your own age. While you pocket the difference from the sale, I finished for him. It's a win-win, Mama. You get taken care of, and I solve my temporary cash problems. I looked at this man, my son in biology only, it seemed, and wondered where I'd gone wrong. What lesson had I failed to teach him about respect, about family, about basic human decency? Get out of my house, Jethro. He laughed, a short, dismissive sound. Actually, it's my house now, legally. Maybe you should start packing. I stepped closer to him, my voice low and steady. I raised you better than this. I worked my fingers to the bone to give you a good life. And this is how you repay me? By stealing the roof over my head? Something flickered in his eyes. Guilt, perhaps, or shame, but it was quickly replaced by defensiveness. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. The people I owe money to aren't patient. And that justifies stealing from your mother? He picked up his beer again, taking a long swallow. You'll thank me once you're settled in the new place. They have activities, transportation to doctor appointments. It's for your own good. I'd heard enough. You have until tomorrow to undo what you've done. Return the deed. Pay back whatever you've spent from that loan. Jethro laughed again. Or what, Mama? You'll ground me? I met his gaze steadily. Or I'll report the forgery to the police. I'll file fraud charges. I'll tell everyone in Nashville how Jethro Culpepper stole his mother's house. His amusement vanished. You wouldn't. Try me. I picked up my purse and headed for the door. I'm staying with Tallulah tonight. When I come back tomorrow, I expect this to be resolved. Where am I supposed to get that kind of money by tomorrow? He called after me, panic edging into his voice. I paused at the door and looked back at him. That sounds like a you problem, son, not a me problem. As I walked down the porch steps, I heard him call my name, his voice angry now. I didn't turn around. For the first time since finding that bank letter, I felt in control. I might not have Jethro's education or connections or smooth talking, but I had something he clearly lacked: integrity, and friends who still believed in it. I reached the sidewalk and pulled out my phone to call Tallulah. The fight for my home had just begun, but I wasn't entering the battlefield alone. And Jethro was about to learn a hard lesson: never underestimate a woman who's spent her whole life fighting to survive. Tallulah's spare bedroom wasn't much, a twin bed with a faded quilt and a nightstand that had seen better days. But it felt like sanctuary that night. I sat on the edge of the bed, my overnight bag beside me, and let the tears come. Not for Jethro. I was done crying over him. But for myself. For the shock and humiliation of it all. For the realization that my own child valued money over my security and dignity. Here, Tallulah appeared in the doorway, holding out a steaming mug. The scent of bourbon mixed with honey and lemon filled the air. My mama's cure for everything. I accepted the mug with a grateful nod, wrapping my hands around its warmth. Tallulah had aged just like I had. Her once black hair was now steel gray, cut in a practical bob that I trimmed for her every month. Laugh lines framed her eyes, and her hands bore the same age spots as mine. We'd grown old together, from wild teenagers to responsible mothers to whatever this phase of life was supposed to be. You did the right thing walking out of there, she said, settling her ample frame next to me on the bed. If you'd stayed, you might have done something you'd regret, like taking my cast iron skillet to his head. Despite everything, I laughed. I thought about it. Well, tomorrow's another day, and you've got more friends than he has tricks. She patted my knee. Opal Lynn called while you were in the shower, said she's put a flag on your property records. Nothing can be processed without additional verification now. I sipped the hot toddy, letting it warm me from the inside. I still can't believe he'd do this to me, after everything. Tallulah snorted. That boy's been selfish since he could walk. Remember when he was 7 and ate all the cupcakes you'd made for the church bake sale? Then tried to blame it on the neighbor's dog? He was just a child then. And now he's a child in a grown man's body with grown man problems. She shook her head. Some people never do learn, Winnie. We sat in companionable silence for a while. Two old friends who'd seen enough of life's hardships to know when words weren't needed. Outside, the April rain began to fall, pattering against the window in a soothing rhythm. Delroy called too, Tallulah said eventually. Said he'd meet you at the bank tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. I nodded, unsurprised that the news had traveled so quickly. In our circle, word moved faster than light. Magnolia's filing an emergency injunction first thing tomorrow. She said it should freeze any transactions on the house until we can sort this out. That girl always did have a good head on her shoulders. Too good for Jethro, that's for sure. Tallulah stood with a slight groan, her knees protesting the movement. You get some rest now. Tomorrow's going to be a busy day. After she left, I set the mug aside and lay back on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. Sleep seemed impossible with my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. What if the injunction failed? What if Jethro had already spent all the money? What if I really did end up in one of those depressing senior apartments, surrounded by strangers, while my son profited from my life's work? I must have fallen asleep eventually, because the next thing I knew, pale morning light was filtering through the thin curtains. For a disorienting moment, I didn't know where I was. Then it all came flooding back. The forged documents, Jethro's betrayal, my ultimatum. I dressed carefully that morning, choosing my most respectable outfit. A navy blue skirt suit I'd bought on clearance at Macy's years ago for special occasions. I didn't have much use for fancy clothes in my line of work, but some situations called for armor, and this was one of them. I applied my makeup with precision, swept my silver hair into a neat bun, and added my mother's pearl earrings, the only thing of value she'd left me when she passed. Tallulah drove me to First Tennessee Bank in her ancient Buick, the radio playing softly in the background. "You look like you're headed to war," she observed as we pulled into the parking lot. I smoothed my skirt. "Maybe I am." Delroy Washington was waiting for us in the lobby, his tall frame easy to spot even in the morning crowd. At 69, he carried himself with the dignity of a man who'd overcome more obstacles than most. One of the first black managers at First Tennessee, he'd mentored dozens of younger bankers over his 40-year career. He'd also been asking me out for coffee every month for the past 3 years, ever since his wife passed. I'd always declined politely, not ready for anything resembling romance after a lifetime of independence. Today, though, I was grateful for his presence and his expertise. "Winnie," he greeted me with a warm handshake. "I've spoken with the loan department. They're expecting us." The meeting was held in a conference room with views of downtown Nashville. 3 bank officials sat across from us, all of them younger than me, all wearing expressions that mixed concern with caution. I recognized the trap immediately. They saw an elderly woman who might be confused, who might not understand financial matters, who could be easily placated with simplified explanations. They didn't know who they were dealing with. I'd managed my salon's books for 40 years. I'd navigated the original mortgage on my house as a single mother with inconsistent income. I'd put away enough to help Jethro with community college and still build a modest retirement fund. I might not have fancy degrees, but I understood money, especially my own. "Mrs. Culpepper," began the woman in the center, a sleek blonde with a practiced smile. "We understand you have concerns about a recent home equity line of credit." "I have more than concerns," I replied, my voice steady. "I have evidence of fraud. I did not apply for that loan. I did not sign those documents. My signature was forged by my son." The 3 exchanged glances. The man on the left, young enough to be my grandson, cleared his throat. "That's a serious allegation, ma'am. Our verification procedures are quite thorough." Delroy leaned forward slightly. "Winnie's signature was forged by a family member who had access to her identification and personal documents. It happens more often than banks like to admit. The question now is how First Tennessee plans to address this situation." The third banker, an older man with salt and pepper hair, spoke up. "We would need to see evidence of the forgery, perhaps a handwriting analysis." "I have something better," I interrupted, pulling a folder from my purse. Inside was a document Magnolia had prepared that morning, a formal statement detailing the fraud, alongside copies of the forged documents Opal Lynn had provided. "My attorney has filed an emergency injunction this morning. The police have been notified. And I have witnesses who can testify that I never intended to take out a loan against my fully paid property." I laid another document on the table, a notarized statement from Tallulah confirming our mortgage burning ceremony 3 years earlier and my frequent statements about never borrowing against the house. The banker's expressions shifted from condescension to concern. "Additionally," Delroy added, "First Tennessee failed in its due diligence. The loan proceeds were deposited into a joint account that had been dormant for 15 years. No verification call was made to the primary applicant, and the application itself was processed with unusual speed." He gave them a pointed look. "One might wonder if Mr. Jethro Culpepper's friendship with someone in the loan department facilitated this oversight." The blonde banker's face flushed. I remembered then that Jethro had dated a loan officer a few years back, a relationship that had ended badly, like most of his entanglements. I wondered if this was another case of my son's past coming back to haunt him. "We take fraud very seriously," the older man said stiffly. We'll need to investigate these claims internally. And in the meantime? I asked. After a moment of uncomfortable silence, the woman spoke. We can freeze the remaining funds in the line of credit while we investigate. As for the money already withdrawn, she consulted a folder in front of her. It appears $162,000 was transferred out last week. My heart sank. That was most of the loan amount. Where did it go? I'm afraid we can't disclose that without a court order or your son's permission. Delroy's expression hardened. Margaret, he addressed the blonde banker by name, you know as well as I do that this bank faces significant liability if it turns out you processed fraudulent documents. Winnie isn't asking for confidential information about another customer. She's asking about a fraudulent transaction made in her name. The three bankers exchanged glances again, having one of those silent conversations people have when they're in a difficult position. Finally, the older man sighed. The funds were wired to Continental Investment Partners in Las Vegas. Las Vegas. Gambling debts, most likely, or one of those sure-thing investment schemes that Jethro was always falling for. I felt sick thinking about it, but pushed the feeling aside. I couldn't afford emotions right now. I want that transaction reversed, I said firmly. Mrs. Culpepper, once wire transfers are completed, I didn't authorize that transfer. I didn't authorize that loan. Either you help me recover those funds, or the next people I talk to will be the banking commission and whatever news channel runs those consumer watchdog segments. By the time we left the bank 2 hours later, they had agreed to freeze the account, launch a formal fraud investigation, and contact Continental Investment Partners about the possibility of recovering the funds. It wasn't everything I wanted, but it was a start. Outside in the spring sunshine, Delroy offered me his arm as we walked to where Tallulah waited in the car. You were magnificent in there, he said. Most people would have been intimidated. I shrugged. I stopped being intimidated by people in suits a long time ago. They put their pants on one leg at a time, just like the rest of us. He chuckled. True enough. He hesitated before adding, I was sorry to hear about Jethro. It's a terrible thing when family betrays you. It is what it is, I replied, not wanting to discuss my son's failings. Thank you for your help today. Any time, Winnie. Any time at all. There was a warmth in his voice that made me glance up at him, really seeing him for perhaps the first time. Delroy Washington was a handsome man with kind eyes and a quiet dignity that spoke of a life well lived. In another world, in another time, perhaps I would have said yes to those coffee invitations, but not now, not with everything else going on. Tallulah drove me straight to Magnolia's office after the bank. The young attorney greeted us in the lobby, her expression cautiously optimistic. The judge granted our emergency injunction, she announced, as she led us back to her office. The house can't be sold until we resolve the ownership dispute. I sank into a chair, relief washing over me. What about the deed transfer? That's more complicated. We'll need to prove forgery, which means handwriting experts, witness testimony. She sat behind her desk, all business now. I've also filed an elder abuse complaint with Adult Protective Services. That gives us another avenue if the forgery case gets complicated. I bristled again at the term elder abuse. In my mind, elder abuse was something that happened to frail old folks in nursing homes, not to independent women like me. But I swallowed my pride. If that label helped me get my house back, I'd accept it. Have you heard from Jethro? Magnolia asked. I shook my head. Not since I left yesterday. But he knows I'm serious. He called me, Magnolia admitted, surprising me. Early this morning. What did he want? She tapped her pen against her legal pad. He wanted to know if I was really representing you. When I confirmed I was, She paused, choosing her words carefully. He suggested that I was only helping you to get back at him for our divorce. I felt my face flush with anger. That boy never could take responsibility for his actions. I made it clear that my representation of you is professional and based on the legal merits of your case. Magnolia's expression softened slightly. He sounded desperate, Winnie. Said something about people expecting repayment by the end of the week. So I'd been right. Gambling debts, or maybe loan sharks. My son had gotten himself into deep trouble and decided that stealing from his mother was the solution. The thought made my heart ache, but I pushed the feeling aside. What happens next? I asked. We wait for the bank's fraud investigation. We continue building our case for the deed reversion. Magnolia leaned forward. But there's something else we can do in the meantime. Something that might resolve this faster. I raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. Jethro has financial problems, but he also has assets. Specifically, he owns a condo downtown, purchased during the real estate boom with a substantial mortgage. My sources tell me he's 3 months behind on payments. I frowned, not seeing where this was going. And the condo association has strict rules about rental properties. Jethro's been subletting his spare bedroom, against association rules, to help cover the mortgage. If someone were to report this violation, understanding dawned. They could force him out. Magnolia nodded. The association could levy fines, potentially significant ones. Given his current financial situation, he'd be in even more trouble. I considered this, conflicted. Part of me, the mother who remembered rocking him through colic and teaching him to ride a bike, recoiled at the thought of deliberately making his situation worse. But another part, the woman who'd been betrayed and nearly made homeless, recognized the strategic advantage. Would it help us get the house back? I asked finally. It would increase the pressure on him to resolve this quickly, and Magnolia hesitated. It might give him a taste of what it feels like to face housing insecurity, something he was willing to inflict on you. The poetic justice wasn't lost on me. Do it, I said, making my decision. But I don't want to know the details. The next few days passed in a blur of legal consultations, bank meetings, and sleepless nights on Tallulah's spare bed. I continued working at my salon, grateful for the distraction and the normalcy of shampooing, cutting, and listening to my clients' problems. I didn't tell them about my own troubles, pride, perhaps, or a desire not to be the subject of gossip. But word got around anyway, as it always does in tight-knit communities. Clients started leaving larger tips. Mrs. Henderson from the church brought homemade casseroles to the salon. Mr. Patterson, the retired attorney who came in monthly for a trim, offered to look over any legal documents free of charge. On the 4th day after discovering the fraud, I received a text message from Jethro. "We need to talk. Meet me at the house tonight, 7 p.m. I showed the message to Tallulah over dinner. "You're not going alone," she declared immediately. "I'm not afraid of my own son. Maybe you should be. He's desperate, Winnie. Desperate people do desperate things." I knew she was right, but I also knew I needed to face him on my own terms. "I'll ask Delroy to come with me. He can wait in the car." Tallulah didn't look happy about it, but she nodded. "And you call me the minute anything seems off." Delroy agreed immediately when I called him, sounding almost pleased to be asked. He picked me up at 6:30, his car freshly washed and smelling faintly of pine air freshener. "You sure you don't want me to come inside with you?" he asked as we pulled up to my house. Jethro's car was already in the driveway. I shook my head. "This is between me and my son, but thank you for being here." The porch light was on as I approached my front door. For a moment, standing there with my key in hand, I felt like a visitor at my own home, a sensation that strengthened my resolve. This was my house, mine, paid for with decades of hard work. No one had the right to take it from me, least of all the person I'd sacrificed so much to raise. I let myself in to find Jethro pacing in the living room. He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, his usually immaculate clothes wrinkled. He spun around when he heard the door. "Finally," he said, his voice ragged. "You're not answering my calls. I'm here now." I set my purse down on the side table, but remained standing near the door. "What do you want to talk about?" He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "You have to call off the lawyers, Mama. The bank's frozen the account. The real estate agent won't return my calls. And now, the condo association is threatening to evict me over some rental violation." I said nothing, just watched him. "I know you're upset," he continued, his tone shifting to the cajoling one he'd used since childhood when trying to get his way. I should have explained things better, but I was trying to help us both. "This house is too big for you. The maintenance alone—" "Stop it," I interrupted, my voice quiet but firm. "Just stop. We both know what this was about, and it wasn't my welfare." His facade crumbled. "I'm in trouble, Mama. Big trouble. I gathered that when you stole my house. I borrowed against it. There's a difference. Not to me. Not when it was done behind my back with a forged signature." He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "I owe some people money. Serious people. They're not patient, and they're not forgiving. Gambling debts? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Jethro nodded miserably. It started small. A poker game here, a sports bet there. Then I tried to win back what I'd lost, and he gestured helplessly. It spiraled. So you decided to steal from your mother. I was going to pay it back, he protested. Once I was square with these guys, I would have refinanced, put the house back in your name. I stared at him, wondering if he actually believed his own lies. And in the meantime, where was I supposed to live? In that senior apartment you mentioned? He had the grace to look ashamed. It's a nice place, Mama. Clean, safe. It's not my home. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign documents returning the deed to me. You're going to take responsibility for the loan you fraudulently obtained in my name. And you're going to find another way to solve your financial problems. Jethro's expression hardened. Or what? You'll send me to jail? Your own son? If necessary. He stared at me in disbelief. You wouldn't. Try me. I met his gaze unflinchingly. I've spent my entire life doing what's right, even when it's hard. I worked 2 jobs to put food on your table. I went without so you could have opportunities I never had. I taught you about honesty and hard work and respect. My voice caught slightly, but I pressed on. Clearly those lessons didn't take. So yes, I will pursue this legally if I have to. Because some things matter more than blood, Jethro. Like integrity. Like justice. For a long moment, we stood there in silence. Mother and son, strangers in all the ways that mattered. Finally, Jethro looked away. I'll sign whatever you want, he said, his voice hollow. But I still need money to pay these guys off. They're not the kind who take no for an answer. I considered him. This man who shared my blood, but apparently none of my values. That's not my problem. You created this mess. You can find a legitimate way out of it. And if I can't, if they come looking for me, then you'll face the consequences of your choices, like an adult. As I turned to leave, Jethro called after me, desperation in his voice. My landlord's giving me until the end of the week to pay up or get out. Where am I supposed to go? I paused at the door, an idea forming. A solution that would solve multiple problems at once. You know, I said slowly, I've been thinking about converting the garage into a rental unit. Could bring in some extra income for my retirement. Jethro frowned, not following. It would need work, proper insulation, a small bathroom, kitchenette. But the bones are there. What does that have to do with? I might be willing to rent it to you, once it's ready. Market rate, of course. Understanding dawned on his face, followed quickly by indignation. You want me to live in your garage? Like someone who needs a place to stay and can't afford better, I finished for him. Take it or leave it. Either way, I expect those signed documents on Magnolia's desk by noon tomorrow. I walked out, closing the door firmly behind me. Delroy was waiting in the car, concern evident on his face. As I slid into the passenger seat, he started to ask a question, but something in my expression stopped him. Instead, he simply said, "Where to now?" I looked back at the house, my house, illuminated by the porch light against the gathering dusk. Home, I replied. I'm going home. The following morning, I stood in my kitchen making coffee, savoring the simple pleasure of being in my own home again. The paperwork formally transferring the deed back to my name wouldn't be processed for a few days yet, but Jethro had signed the necessary documents as promised. Magnolia had called to confirm it, her voice carrying a note of professional satisfaction. He didn't even argue, she'd told me. Just signed everything and walked out without a word. Now, as I poured coffee into my favorite mug, a chipped blue one that Jethro had made in 3rd grade art class, I wondered if I'd been too harsh with him. The mother in me still worried, still cared, despite everything. But the woman who'd fought for her survival all her life knew better. Jethro had made his choices. He'd chosen to betray me in the most fundamental way. Choices had consequences. I carried my coffee to the small table by the kitchen window, settling into the familiar chair with its worn cushion. Outside, spring had fully arrived in Nashville. The maple tree in my backyard was clothed in fresh green leaves, and the herb garden I tended each year was showing promising signs of life. I'd planted that garden 30 years ago, nurturing it through drought and flood, through good years and lean ones. Like everything else in my life, it had survived because of my stubborn determination not to let it fail. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. When I opened it, I found Delroy standing on my porch, holding a brown paper bag. "I brought breakfast," he said, holding up the bag. "Biscuits from Loveless Cafe, still warm." I hesitated only briefly before stepping back to let him in. In the wake of everything that had happened, I was rethinking old patterns, old resistances. Maybe it was time to let someone else in. Just a little. We ate at the kitchen table, the rich aroma of butter and fresh biscuits filling the air. Delroy moved with an easy grace in my kitchen, finding plates and napkins without having to ask where they were kept. It struck me that this was the first time in years, decades maybe, that I'd shared a quiet breakfast with a man in my home. "So what happens now?" Delroy asked as he poured more coffee for us both. I considered the question. The deed gets transferred back to me. The bank continues its fraud investigation. And I start figuring out what to do about the garage. "You're really going to convert it into a rental unit?" I nodded. I meant what I said to Jethro. I could use the extra income. And I paused, the thought still forming. And maybe it's time I started thinking more about the future. My future. Delroy's eyes held mine across the table. "I think that sounds like a fine idea." After breakfast, he helped me clear the dishes, our movements falling into an easy rhythm. When it was time for him to leave, he paused at the door. "Winnie, I've been asking you to coffee for 3 years now. Maybe it's time you said yes?" I studied him, this kind, steady man who had shown up when I needed help, who had brought me breakfast and asked for nothing in return. "Maybe it is," I agreed, surprising us both. His smile lit up his face. "How about Saturday, after you close the salon?" "Saturday it is." After he left, I sat back down at the kitchen table, a strange feeling settling over me. It took a moment to identify it. Possibility. For so long I'd been focused on survival, on making it through each day, each bill, each challenge. I hadn't allowed myself to think about what else life might hold for a woman in her 60s. Now, with my house secure and a potential new income source on the horizon, I could feel doors opening that I hadn't even known were closed. I spent the morning making calls, to a contractor about the garage conversion, to the bank about finalizing the deed transfer, to Tallulah to update her on everything. By noon, I had estimates scheduled and paperwork in progress. It felt good to be taking action, to be building something rather than just defending what I already had. That afternoon, I opened the salon as usual. Cutting hair had been my livelihood for over 40 years, and there was comfort in the familiar routine. The snip of scissors, the hum of dryers, the steady stream of conversation. My clients had always been more than just customers. They were friends, confidants, a community that had supported me through every phase of my life. As I trimmed Mrs. Ellison's gray bob, she caught my eye in the mirror. "Heard about what happened with Jethro," she said quietly. "You doing okay, honey?" Word really did travel fast in our circle. "I'm getting there," I replied, focusing on creating the perfect line across her nape. My sister had something similar happen with her grandson. Got hold of her checkbook, cleaned out her account. Mrs. Ellison shook her head. "Family can hurt you worse than anybody." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The betrayal still stung, raw and personal in a way that made casual conversation difficult. "Heard something else too," Mrs. Ellison continued, a sly note entering her voice. "About you and Delroy Washington having breakfast together." I couldn't help but smile at that. Nashville might be a growing city, but our corner of it still operated like a small town, complete with a highly efficient gossip network. "Just breakfast," I said mildly. Mrs. Ellison's knowing look said she didn't believe me for a second. "About time you let that man take you out. He's been sweet on you for years." As the day progressed, more clients alluded to either Jethro's actions or Delroy's presence at my house. Some were subtle, others direct with their questions and comments. By closing time, I was emotionally exhausted from navigating the conversations, from deciding how much to share and how much to keep private. I was sweeping up hair clippings when the salon door opened. Looking up, I expected to see a late client, but instead found myself face to face with a man I didn't recognize. Tall, broad-shouldered, with an expensive haircut and a suit that probably cost more than I made in a month. "We're closed," I said, continuing to sweep. "Winifred Culpepper?" His voice was smooth, professional, not local. I paused, my grip tightening on the broom handle. "Who's asking?" He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a business card, which he placed on the reception counter. Marcus DeLuca, I represent Continental Investment Partners. The name registered immediately. The company Jethro had wired the money to. I set the broom aside and picked up the card, studying it carefully. What do you want with me? I understand there's a situation involving funds transferred to our company. Funds that are now the subject of a fraud investigation. His tone was neutral, but his eyes were assessing. That's right, I confirmed, standing a little straighter. My son forged my signature on loan documents and wired the money to your company without my knowledge or consent. Marcus DeLuca nodded, as if this information merely confirmed what he already knew. Mrs. Culpepper, my company takes fraud allegations very seriously. We've temporarily frozen the account associated with these funds pending resolution. This was unexpected. I'd assumed the money was long gone, spent on whatever gambling debts or investment schemes Jethro had gotten himself mixed up in. Why are you telling me this? Shouldn't you be talking to the bank? Or the police? He gestured toward the salon's small waiting area. May we sit? This might take a few minutes to explain. I hesitated, then nodded, leading him to the pair of faded armchairs where clients sometimes waited for their appointments. As we sat, I noticed details I'd missed initially. The slight tension in his posture, the careful way he positioned himself, always maintaining a respectful distance. Continental Investment Partners primarily manages investments for high-net-worth individuals, he began. Your son approached us with what he claimed was family money, specifically funds from a home equity loan taken out by his elderly mother who wanted to diversify her retirement portfolio. I snorted at that. I've never had a portfolio in my life. My retirement plan is working until I can't anymore, and hoping Social Security holds out. A flicker of something, sympathy perhaps, crossed his face before his professional mask returned. We had concerns about the transaction from the beginning. The wire came from a personal account rather than a financial advisor. The investment choices your son requested were unusually high risk. And when our compliance team conducted standard due diligence, some inconsistencies emerged. Such as your son's gambling history, which he failed to disclose, and the fact that the property used to secure the loan had been transferred to his name very recently. DeLuca straightened his already impeccable tie. We were in the process of conducting further verification when we received notice of the fraud investigation. I studied him, trying to understand his angle. So what happens now? That depends partly on you, Mrs. Culpepper. The funds can be returned to the originating bank, or, he paused meaningfully, or what? Or they could be redirected according to your instructions, as the rightful account holder. I frowned, not sure I was following. You're saying I could tell you where to send the money? He nodded. With proper verification of your identity and legal documentation confirming the fraud, yes. Our legal team believes that would be defensible given the circumstances. The implications slowly dawned on me. This man was offering me control of the money that was technically mine, since it had been borrowed against my house, but that I'd assumed was lost. It was both a solution and a temptation. How much exactly are we talking about? I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. After our management fee was deducted, $157,425. The number hung in the air between us. To someone like Marcus DeLuca, it might not seem like much. To me, it represented more money than I'd ever had at one time in my entire life. It could pay for the garage conversion with plenty left over. It could supplement my Social Security. It could provide the security I'd been working toward my entire adult life. But it would also mean dealing with the consequences of Jethro's fraud. The bank would still want their money back. There would be questions, investigations, possibly legal repercussions. Why are you really here, Mr. DeLuca? I asked finally. Your company could have handled this with lawyers. You didn't need to come to my salon in person. He seemed to appreciate my directness. Continental values its reputation. We don't want to be associated with fraud, even tangentially. Resolving this quietly and efficiently is in everyone's best interest. Including Jethro's, I pressed. DeLuca's expression remained carefully neutral. Your son made certain representations to us about his financial situation and the source of these funds. If those representations prove fraudulent, there could be consequences beyond just the financial aspects. The implication was clear. Jethro hadn't just lied to me. He'd lied to people who took such things very seriously, people who had the resources to make problems for him if they chose to. I sat back in the faded armchair, considering my options. The practical part of me, the part that had stretched every dollar, that had kept the lights on and food on the table through lean years, saw the opportunity this presented. But the mother in me, despite everything, hesitated. "I need to think about this," I said finally. DeLuca nodded, standing smoothly. "Of course. Here's my direct number." He handed me another card, this one with a cell phone number handwritten on the back. "Call me when you've decided how you want to proceed. But I should mention that our internal review process requires resolution within 7 business days." After he left, I locked the salon door and sat alone in the gathering dusk, turning the business card over and over in my hands. The decision before me wasn't just about money. It was about justice, about consequences, about what kind of person I wanted to be. I drove home slowly, my mind churning with possibilities. The house was dark when I arrived, reminding me that I needed to fix the porch light that had burned out weeks ago. One more task on an endless list of home maintenance chores that seemed to multiply as the house aged. Inside, I moved through my evening routine on autopilot, checking the mail, washing my dinner dishes, laying out clothes for the next day. But my thoughts kept returning to Marcus DeLuca's visit and the choice he'd presented me with. I picked up the phone several times, tempted to call Tallulah or Magnolia for advice. But each time, I set it down again. This was my decision to make. Around 9, a car pulled into my driveway, its headlights sweeping across my living room walls. Through the window, I recognized Jethro's black sedan. My heart rate quickened, but I forced myself to remain calm as I watched him approach the front door. When I opened it, he looked even worse than he had during our last confrontation. Unshaven, eyes bloodshot, clothes rumpled. He'd clearly been drinking, though he wasn't visibly intoxicated. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. I stepped aside to let him in, more from concern about what the neighbors might think than any desire to speak with him. "About what?" Jethro paced my living room, agitation evident in every movement. "Someone from Continental came to see me today. Some suit named DeLuca. So Marcus DeLuca had visited Jethro too. Interesting. What did he want?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "He said they're freezing the money because of the fraud investigation. Said there could be additional consequences if they determine I misrepresented anything." Jethro ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Mama, these people don't mess around. If I don't pay what I owe by the end of the week..." I waited, but he didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to. The fear in his eyes said enough. "How much do you owe?" I asked quietly. 90,000. To a man you don't want to know." I sucked in a breath. Even for Jethro, that was a staggering amount. "Gambling?" He nodded miserably. "Started with poker, then sports betting. I thought I could win it back." It was an old story, one I'd heard versions of throughout my life. Men, and it was almost always men, convincing themselves that the next bet, the next game, the next race would solve all their problems. My own father had been like that, disappearing for days, returning either flush with cash and temporary generosity or empty-pocketed and mean with disappointment. DeLuca said something else, Jethro continued, his voice tight. "Said the funds could be redirected according to your instructions, that you could tell them where to send the money. So that was why he was here. Not to apologize, not to make amends, but to ask me to save him once again." "Please, Mama," he said, seeing the understanding in my eyes. "I know I messed up. I know what I did was wrong. But these people, they're serious. They don't take IOUs. I studied my son, this man I'd raised, this stranger who'd betrayed me so completely. Part of me wanted to help him, to protect him as I always had. But another part, the part that had finally stood up for myself after a lifetime of putting others first, resisted. You forged my signature," I said slowly. "You tried to steal my house. You were going to put me in a home while you pocketed the difference." He had the grace to look ashamed. I was desperate. I wasn't thinking straight. "And now you want me to use the money you stole from me to pay your gambling debts." "Not all of it," he said quickly. "Just enough to get these guys off my back. I can figure out the rest." I thought about what DeLuca had said, that I could direct where the money went. I thought about the garage conversion, about creating a secure source of rental income for my retirement. I thought about all the years I'd worked my fingers to the bone, saving pennies, doing without, making sure Jethro had opportunities I never had. "If I help you," I said carefully, "there would need to be conditions." Hope flickered in his eyes. "Anything. Name it. You get help for your gambling. Real help, not just promises." He nodded quickly. "I will. I swear. You take responsibility for the home equity loan. You work with the bank to restructure it, and you make every payment on time." Another nod. "And you move into the garage apartment once it's finished. Market rate rent, paid on the 1st of every month. No exceptions." This gave him pause. "The garage? For how long?" "Until you've repaid everything you took from me. The loan, the legal fees, the emotional toll." I met his gaze steadily. "However long that takes." I could see him calculating, weighing his desperate situation against his pride. Finally, he nodded. "Okay, I'll do it." "One more thing," I added. "This is your last chance, Jethro. The absolute last. If you ever lie to me again, if you ever try to take advantage of me again, we're done. For good." The gravity of this statement hung between us. For all his faults, Jethro had never had to contemplate a complete severing of ties with his mother. I'd always been his safety net, his fallback plan, the one person who would forgive him anything. "I understand," he said quietly. "I hope you do." I stood, indicating our conversation was over. "I'll talk to DeLuca tomorrow. Get some sleep, Jethro. You look terrible." After he left, I sat alone in my living room for a long time, wondering if I'd made the right decision. There were no guarantees that Jethro would honor his promises, no certainty that helping him now wouldn't just enable more bad behavior in the future. But I'd spent a lifetime making hard choices. I'd raised a child alone when it would have been easier to give up. I'd built a business from nothing when others said I couldn't. I'd held on to this house through lean years and personal setbacks because I believed in creating something that would last. The decision I'd made tonight was just one more hard choice in a lifetime full of them. But this time, I'd made it with clear eyes and firm boundaries. This time, I'd put myself first, while still extending a hand to someone drowning in consequences of their own making. As I finally headed to bed, I paused in the hallway, looking at the family photos that lined the wall. Jethro as a toddler, gap-toothed and grinning. As a teenager, proud in his prom tuxedo. As a young man at his college graduation. The mother who had taken those photos could never have imagined the path we'd travel, the betrayal and hard-won redemption that lay ahead. But the woman I was now, older, wiser, stronger, knew that life rarely followed the paths we imagined. The true measure of a person wasn't in avoiding hardship, but in how they faced it when it came. Tomorrow, I would call Marcus DeLuca. I would set conditions and make arrangements. I would continue planning the garage conversion with renewed purpose. And on Saturday, I would have coffee with Delroy Washington, opening myself to possibilities I'd long denied. My son had tried to make me homeless. Instead, he'd only succeeded in reminding me of my own strength, and inadvertently opening doors to a future I hadn't dared to imagine for myself. 6 months can change everything. The summer heat has given way to fall's crisp embrace, and the maple tree in my backyard is a riot of gold and crimson. From where I sit on my back porch, cup of tea warming my hands against the October chill, I can see the transformation that's taken place, not just in the season, but in my life. The garage apartment is finished, a cozy one-bedroom with a kitchenette and small bathroom. Better than what Jethro deserves, perhaps, but I did it right. No cutting corners, no temporary fixes. Just like everything else I've built in my life, I made it to last. Jethro moved in 4 months ago, after the contractors finished. Those first few weeks were awkward, both of us navigating a new relationship built on broken trust and tentative redemption. He pays his rent on time, $850 on the 1st of each month, market rate just like I promised. Sometimes I hear him coming and going, the purr of his car engine in the driveway, the closing of his door. We have dinner together once a week, usually Sundays. It's not forgiveness, not exactly, but it's something like peace. The money from Continental went exactly where it needed to go. $90,000 to clear Jethro's gambling debts. The rest split between the garage conversion and my savings account. Marcus DeLuca handled everything with discreet efficiency, making the funds disappear from Continental's books as if they'd never been there. A clean solution for everyone involved. Jethro attends Gamblers Anonymous meetings twice a week at a church downtown. I don't ask for details, and he doesn't offer many, but I've noticed small changes. He's more reliable, less frantic. The haunted look in his eyes has faded. Last month, he got a new job with a commercial real estate firm. A fresh start, away from the connections that fed his addiction. As for me, I've discovered that life at 67 can hold surprises you never expected. "Thought I might find you out here," Delroy says, stepping through the back door with 2 slices of pie on small plates. "Tallulah dropped this off. Said it's her grandmother's recipe." I accept the plate with a smile. 6 months ago, Delroy and I had our first official date, coffee at a small cafe downtown. Since then, we've developed a comfortable routine. Dinner on Wednesday nights, movies sometimes on Saturdays. He keeps a toothbrush in my bathroom and knows how I take my tea. We're not rushing into anything. At our age, there's no need. But there's a sweetness to this late-blooming relationship that I never anticipated. "Opal Lynn called," I tell him as he settles into the chair beside mine. "The county's finally processing those property tax relief forms for seniors. Should save me about $600 a year." Delroy nods appreciatively. Every bit helps. That's one thing I love about him. He understands the value of small economies, the careful management of limited resources. Unlike Jethro, who always wanted more, faster, bigger, Delroy finds satisfaction in sufficiency. The salon is doing well, though I've cut back my hours slightly. 3 days a week now instead of 5, giving my hands a rest and my spirit time to explore other interests. I've joined Tallulah's gardening club. Started volunteering at the library's literacy program 1 morning a week. Small expansions in a life that had grown too narrow without my noticing. Magnolia stops by the salon occasionally, ostensibly for a trim, but really to check on me. She's become more than just my attorney, something like a friend, or maybe the daughter I never had. Last month, she helped me set up a will and proper estate planning documents. No more opportunities for anyone to take advantage of me. "Have you thought more about Thanksgiving?" Delroy asks, breaking into my reflections. I nod. The holiday is still weeks away, but it represents a decision point. Traditionally, I've always hosted Thanksgiving, cooking for Jethro and whoever else didn't have a place to go. This year, Delroy has invited me to join his family gathering instead. His daughter and her husband, his 3 grandchildren, his sister from Atlanta. "I think I'd like that," I say finally. Something new this year. He reaches across the small space between our chairs, taking my hand in his. His palm is warm against mine, solid and reassuring. "They're looking forward to meeting you." The sun is setting earlier these days, casting long shadows across my backyard. From the garage apartment, I can see a light come on, Jethro returning from work. In a few minutes, he'll walk across to the main house, knock politely on the back door, and ask if I need anything from the grocery store. Our new ritual. Part atonement, part genuine concern. I've been thinking a lot about forgiveness lately. Not the easy kind that comes with apologies and promises, but the harder variety that acknowledges harm done and still chooses to move forward. I haven't fully forgiven Jethro. Maybe I never will. But I've found a way to hold both the betrayal and the possibility of redemption in the same heart. That might be the gift of age, the capacity to hold contradictions without needing to resolve them. To understand that people can be both terrible and worthy of compassion. That trust, once broken, may never be fully restored, but relationships can still find new forms. "What are you thinking about so seriously over there?" Delroy asks, his voice gentle in the gathering dusk. "Just life," I reply. "How nothing turns out quite like you expect." He chuckles softly. Ain't that the truth? We sit in companionable silence as darkness settles around us. At 67, I never expected to be starting a new relationship, managing a rental property, or rebuilding a damaged bond with my son. I never imagined I'd have to fight for my home or discover reserves of strength I didn't know I possessed. But then, I never expected a lot of things that life handed me. Being abandoned while pregnant at 18, building a business from scratch, raising a child alone. Life is what happens while you're making other plans, as the saying goes. The knock at the back door comes right on schedule. Jethro stands there, car keys in hand, a tentative smile on his face. Heading to the store. Need anything? Coffee creamer, I tell him. And maybe some of those oatmeal cookies I like. He nods, making a mental note. His eyes meet mine briefly, and I see in them a complicated mixture of regret, gratitude, and something like hope. 6 months ago, I wouldn't have believed this moment possible. 6 months ago, I was ready to cut him out of my life completely. As he heads back to his car, Delroy squeezes my hand gently. You did good, Winnie, he says quietly. With all of it. Maybe he's right. Maybe weathering this storm, fighting for what was mine, standing my ground but still leaving room for redemption, was the right path. Not the easiest one, certainly, but the one that lets me look in the mirror each morning and recognize the woman staring back. The woman who refused to be made homeless, who turned betrayal into an opportunity for growth, who found in the autumn of her life new possibilities she never dared imagine. The porch light casts a warm glow as darkness settles fully around us. Inside, my house waits, secure, mine, a testament to decades of hard work and determination. The garage apartment stands as proof that new beginnings can emerge from broken trust, and Delroy's hand in mine suggests that some chapters of life can start at any age. 6 months ago, my son forged my signature to steal my house. He woke up to find himself homeless instead. But the real story isn't about what he did or the consequences he faced. It's about what I discovered along the way, about myself, about resilience, about the strength that comes from standing up for yourself, even when it breaks your heart to do so. If I've learned anything from this ordeal, it's that we're never too old to fight for what's ours, never too old to set boundaries, never too old to start again, and certainly never too old to surprise ourselves with just how strong we really are. If you've enjoyed my story, please hit that subscribe button to hear more about my journey. And don't forget to ring that notification bell so you don't miss any updates on how I'm turning my garage rental business into a retirement plan.